You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 22nd of June 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
Sir Keir Starmer sees the writing on the wall and resigns. But what does that mean for the UK's reputation as the country prepares for its 7th Prime Minister in 10 years? We've got a roundtable discussion ready to go, and we'll get the view of financial markets as well. After that, we head to Bürgenstock in Switzerland, where US and Iranian negotiators have wrapped up a weekend of talks. Monocle's Inzamam Rashid is at the Swiss resort for us. And then,
over 18,000 kilometres lie between Portugal and the Sydney suburb of Petersham. But the culture of these two places brings them a lot closer together.
ahead of the release of Monocle's Quality of Life magazine, our Quality of Life radio series kicks off today in Sydney via Portugal. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. And a very happy Monday to all of our listeners around the world. Hope you've had great weekends. Another day, another UK Prime Minister resigns. Sir Keir Starmer this morning announced that he would step down outside Downing Street, clearing a path for a leadership contest and a new Prime Minister to take over by September, most likely much earlier than that. Whoever replaces him, and it does look to be more of a coronation at this point of former Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham than a contest, will become the country's 7th Prime Minister in 10 years and the second Labour Prime Minister just 2 years after the party won a resounding victory in parliamentary elections. Well, joining me now here in the studio is Monocle's editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck and Monocle writer Julia Jen. We are hiding away from the incredible heat outside. Is it good to be here to both of you?
Well, it's always nice to be with you, Chris, and discussing British politics, an endless topic of conversation in this country, and new prime ministers. They change like the pop stars at the top of the charts these days. It's very difficult.
Am I able to do a if you can't stand the heat?
You go for it.
Kind of line here.
You go for it.
Andrew, let me start with you on this. I guess paint a picture for us of the last 10 years, because we've been through a lot in British politics. It wasn't always this chaotic, was it?
No, when I grew up, it was Thatcher, and then we had the years of Blair. And now, as I say, we do seem to go through prime ministers at a rate of knots. Obviously Liz Truss being the shortest, but the likes of Theresa May have come and gone, Rishi Sunak, and my concern is, that there are a few things going on here. One, I think the public has lost all ability to allow somebody to have a long-term stab at a job, especially as Prime Minister. So I think there are fundamental things happening in the world that no Prime Minister can dodge. So when the war broke out in Ukraine, when we see what's happening in the Gulf, these shocks to the economy are very hard to navigate. And Britain, not unlike many other countries, is trapped in this position where we have high welfare costs. We're already highly taxing people. Can you dare tax people more money? And we've borrowed so much money that as a percentage of GDP, it's one of the highest it's ever been. So what does any leader do? So it's very complicated, and I think a bit like the people who watch these TV shows where you do a makeover of a house overnight and it looks all miraculous the next morning. The public wants that. The public isn't willing to wait for change. They want to see fundamental change happen rapidly. And it's just boring. It's not that easy.
It is definitely not that easy. Julia, to bring you in on this, how will this look to the world outside of the UK? Will there be an understanding that this was just Starmer's time? Or, to Andrew's point, is there going to be worry that British politics is less stable, the public is less patient?
Yeah, I mean, I think all those things, it's not great for our kind of look on the world stage. But I also think that a lot of leaders will have a lot of sympathy with Starmer. He wasn't quite strong enough to hold out. And I guess that's his kind of character flaw, right? And we can analyse that. But I think a lot of leaders will be looking at him and thinking, that could so easily be me if I just wasn't holding on in the right way, if events weren't quite going in my favour just a little bit. So, we can see Merz in Germany, his approval ratings are incredibly low. We've got 76%, I think, with the beginning of June, there was a poll of disapproval ratings. And then there's 14% apparently level of trust in Macron. That poll came out today, which is, just dismal. So I think there's this understanding really that there's such a febrile, such turmoil really in our kind of discourse, in our politics. And that's really not helped by actors such as, Russia, for example. And it's fascinating looking at the role of Russia really in all of this. So the arson attacks that happened on Keir's properties and a car linked to Keir Starmer in the last year. And that kind of culminated in a trial last week where we had the BBC revealing that Russia was behind those arson attacks. So operating in such a tricky landscape. And I wonder if there is from the public some level of understanding of the complexity of the situation that a Prime Minister is operating in. So I think, there'll be that sense of sympathy, a sympathy with Starmer, with the kind of situation he was faced with.
Sympathy from world leaders who no doubt are facing many of the same problems that Keir Starmer has been facing. But Andrew, to your point of the home makeover that we're now about to go through once again, do you get the sense that Andy Burnham, who is most likely by all accounts at this point basically going to be the next Prime Minister, does he have a shot at being different here, or is he going to be promising the same thing? He is this interesting sort of outsider, former mayor, which is something very much for you as host of our urbanist show. That's kind of significant. He's also outside of the London bubble. Does he stand a chance?
He does. There are a few things in his favour. One, he understands the mechanics of Westminster better than Starmer. Starmer only became an MP when he was 52. And when he got into Downing Street, he'd never run a big government department, and it showed. He was pretty inept at manipulating MPs, getting them to do his bidding. He very quickly lost control over the party, and he just wasn't brutal enough in all sorts of ways. That he. So I talked earlier about the welfare bill. So he had this attempt at cutting back the welfare bill with this payment that's given to older people here in the UK. He was going to stop that for people who had enough money, and it wasn't a terrible idea, but it was a very easy issue for the right wing press to get behind and say, "Oh, he's bashing old people," and he couldn't hold his ground. And then he just made some awful decisions, around Peter Mandelson being our ambassador to the US, of which he had to kind of back away. So he seemed just so flippy-floppy. Burnham understands how politics works, and I think is going to stand a better chance of that. And Burnham also, because he's a little bit more on the left of the party, well, he is more on the left of the party, I think he has an ability to bring along at least the parliamentary Labour Party and also the broader membership. But the thing that he's going to bump up against you really immediately is, he made this speech just over a year ago where he said, that he wouldn't be in hock to the bond market. Every Prime Minister is in hock to the bond markets. We saw what happened to Liz Truss. And if he wants to be the next Liz Truss and be out within 40-odd days because he says, screw you, I'm going to go my own way and I'm going to lavish more spending on welfare and I'm going to raise taxes on everybody yet again, it will go south very, very quickly. So again, limited manoeuvrability, but he does have some manoeuvrability. And if he just shows some guts and leads and is a character and can somehow articulate what people are thinking and feeling, then he stands a chance.
Just very quickly to follow that up, Andrew, because we will get into the financial markets separately. But, in terms of policy, though, do you actually expect Andy Burnham to be significantly different? Is he significantly further on the left in terms of what he actually wants to do, aside from what you talk about when it comes to, just being a stronger leader?
Well, there's a few things. We have a few clues from things he's said before coming into Parliament. one of the things in the UK is that we have an absolutely locked down, terrible, terrible housing market. And he is one of these people who have said, look, some people won't like it, but you should have a property tax and move away from this situation we have here where you pay a huge tax when you buy a house called stamp duty. He said, get rid of stamp duty. Now, if you could do something bold like that freed up the manoeuvrability of people around this country, it's like, because now someone buys an apartment or a house, they're never going to move again because they just can't face saving up this tax again. So if he unlocks something like that. And the other thing is, I have some confidence because we've seen like the leaders of the Unite Union here in the UK saying things like, do not have Miliband as your chancellor. This is the currently somebody who's pushing through all this green agenda. Make sure that you're actually doing something for jobs. And I think he might listen to that. I think he is aware that Starmer's promise it will all be about growth when I get into power. That he completely messed that up, and they raised taxes too quickly. And I think that maybe Burnham will, in a desire to do right by working class people and create more jobs, he may actually end up being more business friendly than we imagine.
Julia, just quickly on the other side of this, what do we know of Andy Burnham's views on foreign policy? Because that, of course, is important in this particular moment as well. UK, always a staunch ally of Ukraine, especially. Will he be continuing all of that, or is there any worry there?
Well, I think he's made it quite clear that domestic issues are going to be his focus. So like Andrew was talking about jobs, growth, all of that. So I think whoever he brings in as his foreign secretary, we've really got to keep our eyes on that in terms of what direction he's going to be going in. Foreign secretary will be making a hell of a lot of trips. I think Burnham will really be staying at home, really trying to solidify his position here. But there are issues that, Britain can't ignore in terms of defence. We've seen very public, very embarrassing, really berating of Britain from NATO allies, asking us to really up our game when it comes to how much we spend on defence. That's also linked to the jobs issue, to the kind of issue of how we create opportunities in this country, especially for young people. And that's something that, has really been talked about. For example, in Wales, huge investment in the defence industry there and creating jobs for young people who feel stuck in their futures. So I think, all of that. And it's interesting, welfare spending cuts, are those going to happen to make way for defence? So I think really focusing on all of that. But also one big date that's coming up in the calendar is later in July, the 17th of July. That's going to be the big EU-UK summit in Brussels. And potentially Burnham will already be in post for that. And that will be a really big test. Of course, that's one of Starmer's big legacies that he's leaving behind, is that reset in EU-UK relationship. And what will happen there in terms of potentially the EU and UK really hashing out single market, freer flow of kind of trade and goods between the two blocks. So how Burnham behaves there, if he is already in post, that will be a big sort of signifier of what's to come.
We'll see how quickly this all comes about. Monocle's Andrew Tuck and Julia Jen, thank you very much. Now, for the reaction to all of this from the financial markets, we can also turn to Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. Ewan, great to have you with us as well. Are markets rejoicing or flailing at Starmer's announcement?
Hello, Chris. Well, markets are always forward-looking. So truth be told, they already priced in Starmer's exit. But we now have a timetable. And with Wes Streeting backing former Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, we've got a strong favourite. Now, the pound is currently trading close to its 2026 low against the dollar. UK government bonds, known as gilts, well, they're fairly steady this morning after 2 days of losses. I think the key question for investors is what the impact on the UK's finances will be if Burnham becomes Premier as expected. And so far, well, we've got little clarity on that question. Andrew mentioned earlier that famous quote from Burnham about not being in hock to the bond markets quite so much. That was taken as a signal that he wanted the government to worry a bit less about markets and perhaps spend and borrow a bit more. Since then, though, he's dialed back on those comments and said that he does expect to maintain the government's current fiscal rules on borrowing and spending. I think also key for investors will be who we get moving into number 11 Downing Street, the residence of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And it's highly likely that the new PM will want a new Chancellor, and who that is will send a clear signal as to what kind of economic policy we're likely to get from the government.
Ewan, just to follow up on some of that, it sounds like markets are taking this in their stride and already focusing on Andy Burnham. But is there any sense from markets, do they think about what we've been talking about on this show, the idea that this is the seventh prime minister in 10 years that's going to come into office, that question of stability in the UK, is that a topic at all for investors?
Yeah, I think it's undeniable that the political uncertainty we've seen in the UK and what a lot of upheaval we've had, it's undeniable that that has an effect on markets. Just to illustrate that point, I'll just tell you what the UK government can borrow over 10 years at. If the UK issues a 10-year bond, the interest rate is 4.8%. In Germany, it is less than 3%. And even in France, which is a country not known for its fiscal discipline, the French government can borrow over 10 years at 3.7%. So more than a percentage point less than the UK. It might not sound like a lot, but when you're in debt to the tune of £3 trillion, as the UK government is, that adds up to a huge amount of interest. So that is a premium, really, on the political uncertainty that we've seen over the last 10 years. So, yes, absolutely, it does have effect on markets.
Well, just to follow that up, Ewan, it's interesting you give the other two examples because it's not like the German and French leaders are particularly popular either. So I guess one question for me would be, we also have 10 years of Brexit, the anniversary coming up tomorrow. Is that part of the reason maybe that, the UK has to borrow so much higher than Europe, or would you discount that?
Well, that is a discussion probably for a whole other long discussion indeed. But certainly, I think investors are weighing what's happened over the course of the last 10 years. But that plays into the political uncertainty narrative as well, because of course, for years the UK was discussing how it would leave the European Union and the exact deal we were going to get. So that went on for absolutely ages, and that uncertainty really, really bothered investors. I think now that's all calmed down, that markets have sort of broadly discounted that. But as to whether there's been a long-term effect, well, that is a really interesting question for investors to look at.
Bloomberg's Ewan Potts, thank you very much for joining us for some more analysis of the UK. There will be plenty more across our shows, including The Globalist tomorrow morning. But now here's Anita Riotto with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. China has slapped sanctions on 10 U.S. military-related companies in response to a recent American move that bars several leading tech businesses from defense contracts. The move comes just 1 month after Donald Trump's visit to Beijing. The finance ministry in Beijing added that government entities will also be prohibited from purchasing products from 46 other American companies. Australia and Canada have inked a new export agreement worth $1.75 billion to build an Australian-designed long-range radar system in Canada. Defense Ministers Richard Marles and Stephen Furr signed the first phase of this deal to provide early warning radar coverage from the Canada-US border deep into the Arctic. And finally, Radio France is broadcasting a recently discovered piece of unheard music this Monday. The flutist Mathilde Calderini and harpist Nicolas Toulier will perform 7 short pieces of the Mozart manuscript, which was found in the archives of the music department of the French National Library, the BNF. It's believed the notebook dates from the Austrian composer's final stay in Paris in 1778. Those are today's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Anita. The first round of talks between the United States and Iran after their ceasefire deal last week appear to have gone about as well as can be expected. In Bergenstock, Switzerland, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance put on his best face for negotiations with Iran's foreign minister, among others, promising a reformed relationship if Iran makes peace with the region and gives up nuclear weapons. That was supplemented, of course, by the usual threats from U.S. President Donald Trump to reverse the whole thing and restart the war if he feels like it. Well, joining us now is Monocle's golf correspondent Inzamam Rashid, who is at Bergenstock and has been there over the weekend as well. Inzamam, set the mood over there for us, if you could.
Well, look, it's been, what was a whole day yesterday of diplomacy and negotiations, but also, Chris, twists and turns, as you'd expect with the US and Iran in the same room, having discussions. I'll go through some of the pivotal moments of yesterday, but right now, this morning, we're in a situation, or this afternoon, we're in a situation where the senior teams from the Iranian side, the senior teams from the Pakistani side have now left Bergenstock Resort and are heading back to their respected countries. And this was after hours and hours of negotiations face-to-face with the Iranians, with the US teams, hosted by the Qataris and mediated by the Pakistanis. And the sense that I get from some of my sources inside the negotiating room is that they've made progress on process overnight rather than actual technical resolutions. They've created committees, they've created working groups and a roadmap for the next 60 days and some communication channels as well. So the outcomes of the talks overnight, if I just make briefly, Chris, is that they've set up an oversight committee. They've put mechanisms together to set up technical talks. They've got working groups on the nuclear issue inside Iran and sanctions on Iran as well. They're also monitoring and dispute resolution group that's been set up. Maybe this is all a bit fancy wording and we don't actually know what that means, but this is what they are saying. And there is a deconfliction cell for Lebanon, which I think is important because there was a real push to try and end the Israeli attacks inside Lebanon, the Hezbollah response attacks to Israel as well. That is number one on the Memorandum of Understanding to end all fighting, including Lebanon. Just very briefly, I want to go back to two pivotal moments that I mentioned that took place yesterday, Chris. Firstly, there was supposed to be a photo opportunity with all four leaders, J.D. Vance, the Pakistani Prime Minister, the Qatari Prime Minister, and also the Iranian Foreign Minister. The Iranian Foreign Minister came into the room, he hugged the Pakistani Prime Minister, he shared a few words, and then effectively he left the room and didn't return until the negotiation started. So he snubbed the Americans. They didn't have that media moment in front of the world's media. And that was a pretty pivotal moment. You saw the reaction on J.D. Vance's face when he found out that the Iranians wouldn't be there. The second moment is when they were all in the room and having discussions and were knee-deep in negotiations for a path to peace. President Trump from 4,000 miles away put a post out on social media. He also spoke to Fox News, and he renewed his threats directly to Iran. In fact, he threatened the leadership, saying that you may not even make it back to your country. Now, he used expletives in that, which I'm not going to repeat, but he threatened them directly, and that was pretty brutal. Just imagine the scene where you've got the Iranians on one side, the US delegation with J.D. Vance on another side, and the president 4,000 miles away is renewing these threats. It was an eyebrow-raising moment yesterday, which almost derailed the whole talks, but the Pakistanis and the Qataris managed to bring the Iranians back into the room, and they continued talking to 3 o'clock this morning.
Inzi, it is such incredible scenes, the way you're describing that there. And also this juxtaposition, which I guess I want to get to. The fact that they are setting up committees, which sounds like a serious negotiation. This is how negotiations over the next 60 days are supposed to happen. That suggests that we've now entered an actual phase of figuring out what needs to happen here, right? Getting into all the nitty-gritty detail. But at the same time, I guess to exactly your point of what happened yesterday, Donald Trump doesn't usually do detail. He wants the sort of big, quick fix and the big grand fix.
Yeah, he does, but he's got to wait another 57 days in order to get the big grand fix. And that's even if we get it done in that time. But you're right. It shows, one, the fragility of talks, because President Trump can say anything and then, the Iranians can get frustrated as they were yesterday. But also, as you mentioned, these groups that have now been set up to talk about the different issues in the Memorandum of Understanding is a positive step, because it gives a sense that they are trying to get as many people involved to effectively cover all the bases. And what's important is that technical teams will be staying on over the next few days. So it won't be the senior leadership, as I mentioned. Many of them already left, and J.D. Vance is still here, but is expected to leave shortly as well. But there will be technical discussions over the next few days still here in Bergenstock. And I think that's important to notify, because it means that all the sides are still putting in the time and effort to ensure that talks continue over the next few days at this venue.
Inzi, you did mention this Lebanon working group, as it were. I mean, how determined might Israel and Hezbollah be to actually scupper this deal in the next 57 days?
Well, I think that the onus is on Israel, because when we saw the Memorandum of Understanding signed, Israeli attacks into Lebanon were pretty frequent. We saw quite a few of them, and that was a huge concern. Yes, there were Hezbollah attacks in response, but this has been the whole problem, whereby Benjamin Netanyahu has not been on the same page as President Trump. In fact, there's been a lot of friction between the two leaders, and that's cause for concern. The Israeli defense and military have said that they do not want to leave Lebanon because they've got boots on the ground. That's something that they don't want to retreat from. And the problem that we've got right now is the Iranians have been very clear, is that you've got to effectively fulfill point number one, which is end all the fighting, including Lebanon, before we can go and have a finalization of this whole deal over the next 60 days. So point one has to be fulfilled. And if it isn't, then we don't effectively get anywhere and we don't get a final deal out of this MOU, Chris.
Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent, reporting from Bürgenstock, Switzerland for us. Thank you very much. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Well, finally on today's show, this week marks the release of Monocle's annual Quality of Life magazine issue, and as part of that, we have a series throughout this week on The Briefing and The Globalist about what makes quality of life in a city. For today's episode, we're heading to Sydney, one of the world's most multicultural hubs. The harbour city's diversity is reflected in its vibrant selection of global restaurants, cafes and bars. Here, Monocle contributor Adam Hancock takes us to Little Portugal in Sydney's inner west to learn more about its Portuguese diaspora and their delicious cuisine.
Over 18,000 kilometres lie between Portugal and the Sydney suburb of Petersham. But the culture of these two places brings them a lot closer together. New Canterbury Road may appear like any other busy street in the city's inner west. But if you look closely, it's filled with Portuguese businesses. From shops to restaurants and cafes, this is the place to visit for a taste of Portugal in the heart of Sydney. Before sampling some of the culinary delights that this neighbourhood has to offer, I wanted to find out a little bit more about why Petersham came to be known as Little Portugal. Here's Sydney Morning Herald journalist Eric Bagshaw.
The Portuguese, just like many migrant communities in Australia, really resettled after World War II. That was a huge wave of migration happened, and in that process, immigrants found new suburbs. And in the case of the Portuguese, it was Petersham. And from there grows restaurants, football clubs, and a sense of community.
Hello Sam, good to meet you.
Pleasure, nice meeting you, Adam.
Have you been busy today or?
On and off, yes.
I'm starting my Petersham tour in Charlie's Deli, a family-run business which started in 1980 and sells a whole range of authentic Portuguese products. The owner is Sam Santoro.
I'd say probably 6% of my customers are Portuguese. And then, I can't put a percentage on it, but the colonies, East Timor, Angola, Mozambique, Brazil to an extent. And then they've got the neighbours like Spain. And I get a fair few Europeans in here, a few Italians, a few French, yeah.
What sort of products do you sell here that are sort of uniquely Portuguese?
There's a lot of products, like from pastes and marmalades to olives. Delis are a dying trade because you've got your larger supermarkets, your chain supermarkets. So we're trying to be really specialised in products, in gourmet products and all that. So we focus on the codfish, bacala. That's the biggest seller in Petersham. I sell so much bacala. It's amazing. It's like they have a recipe for every day of the year. You speak to any Portuguese, they've always got something different to do with it,
So Sam, what are we looking at here now?
Okay, your gallo oils come in bottles, which are like the plain, the virgin, and then you've got your classical, and then you've got your extra virgin, reserva. You don't cook with reserva. That's more for salads and for dressings and all that. The other two you can use for cooking.
So these very popular with your customers?
Very popular. Not as popular as Saloio, but if you're a Gallo drinker, you don't like Saloio. Right. If you're a Saloio drinker, you don't like Gallo. Right, it's like they go for their national teams like Benfica and Sporting. If you see someone wearing green, Sporting, and they won't wear red or blue. Right. Because they're the opposite team. So, yeah.
So they're very passionate about their oils, like their football.
Extremely passionate, yes.
Well, I've been walking down the main road here in Petersham, and I've come across the Portuguese and Spanish butchery, and I'm just stood outside and I can see a huge selection of meats, sausages, pork chops, and there's lots of legs of ham and pork hanging from the ceiling as well, and then some traditional Portuguese goods as well. So let's go inside to take a look.
Olha, queria aquelas costelas que tem ali no sal. Uma costela.
Being surrounded by meat was making me a bit peckish for a meal that's quite unique in Australia. The Portuguese chicken burger. One of the places to go to grab one is Frango's, a restaurant chain which first opened in Petersham in 1989. Sadly for me, it was shut for summer break, leaving my cravings unfulfilled. Although it wasn't hard to find another chain, Oporto's, to pick one up on my way home. Anyhow, here's Eric Bagshaw again.
Many probably would never have heard of a Portuguese chicken burger, and that's because they're not really from Portugal at all. They were effectively invented in Sydney. What defines a Portuguese chicken burger is really the peri-peri sauce. And the peri-peri sauce was actually bought from the Portuguese colonies over to Africa and then incorporated with other dishes throughout the Portuguese sort of empire. And eventually some of that peri-peri sauce made its way onto chicken. And of course, what Australians decided to do is to combine peri-peri sauce with chicken and put it on a burger with a bunch of mayo, some lettuce, and a couple of buns.
Now, if you do pop down to Petersham for some Portuguese chicken, you might then be looking for a dessert to finish things off. And what better sweet treat than a Portuguese tart? Well, for the best pastel de natas in town, there's only one place to go, Sweet Belém Cake Boutique. I spoke to their owner, Jose Silva.
When did you get involved with the shop? Because it's been open for about 20 odd years now?
Yeah, so the shop was opened in 2002. Right. I used to come here, buy the tarts and actually take it to my team. I think it's one of the best Portuguese tarts, if not in the world, at least out of Portugal. Wow. And then I really loved the product. And then I took over in 2012 and we've had it ever since.
And is there a sort of special or unique recipe that you use for your tarts that makes them so good?
Yeah, our pastry is amazing. And part of the reason we use butter instead of margarine to do our puff pastry. And then also our custard, we use real ingredients. We use free-range eggs, which I think is very important for flavour. Also, we use real vanilla. We infuse it with the custard with vanilla bean and lemon zest. And then cinnamon on top as well.
Okay. Well, I've had these in Portugal years ago, so it's time to put it to the test. That's really good. And you're right as well about the pastry. Yeah. It's a little bit thicker. Yeah. And you can really taste like that crunch in it.
Yeah, it's quite crunchy. It's always crisp, and that's part of one of our secrets as well.
And do you ever try and tweak the recipe, or is it always staying the same?
No, the recipe of the custard we don't tweak it. It's historical. It's historical. We don't touch that.
Sweet Belém is still very popular with not just the local Portuguese community, but also visitors from across Sydney. But one thing a few locals have told me is that Petersham is perhaps starting to lose some of its Portuguese influence, as people move away from the area and some businesses close down. Let's hear from Eric Bagshaw again.
I think it's a real battle for ageing migrant communities to hold on to that sense of place and sense of identity, because unfortunately as their children grow older, they sort of assimilate into wider Australian society, and that first generation Portugueseness could be lost. But they've probably done it more successfully than most. In Petersham in particular, you go to the local tennis club, or to the Madeira club, or to some of those venues, and you'll see that they've managed to really hold on to some of that old school Portuguese hospitality and Portuguese food, but also appeal to younger generations.
So whilst an afternoon in Petersham might not fully transport you to the streets of Porto or Lisbon, there's still plenty of Portuguese charm to be found. And I'll certainly be back to get my hands on a non-authentic Portuguese chicken burger. For Monocle Radio in Sydney, I'm Adam Hancock.
Adam Hancock in Sydney tucking into chicken burgers and pastel di natas and everything else. Monocle's Quality of Life survey will be out in our July-August issue on newsstands from Thursday. The series continues through this week. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Thomas Waterhouse. Our researcher was Josefina Astrid-Nagler-Gomez. And our studio manager was Mariella Bevan. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.